Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us live. We got a great one for y'all this evening. Can't wait to get started. So let's get to it. This is the G Shit Podcast, where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. This is the G Shit Podcast. Let's get to it. I really appreciate y'all tuning in. We got a very, very special guest on today's episode joining us live. It is Immanuel Jarvis from Jireh Family Farms. We're going to bring him on and learn a little bit more, not just about his background, but also this family farm business, which we have here locally in Durham, North Carolina. Immanuel, I've said it before, but thank you again for joining me here live to have this conversation and letting the people get to know not just a little bit about you, but your family business.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Now, for those of you who are not aware, Jireh Family Farm is a local staple here in Durham, relatively new, I would say, and they've really established a great brand, in my opinion. I've been to or participated in some of their events that they've been affiliated with in the past, and it's always resonated with me, just the family approach and how they've done things. So, Immanuel, before we actually get started with the farm, I'd just be curious to hear about your background before you even got to this part of the United States. Where were you brought up?
Well, I was born in New York, but I've lived in the South most of my life. My wife and I were married. We met and got married in 2000, so we're going to be celebrating our 23rd year of marriage. And I've always been in sales and marketing and in communications. Done different sales jobs and everything from telecommunications to B2B, retail, corporate stuff. So I've been in the kind of sales background for a long time and really enjoyed sales, enjoyed communicating with individuals, with decision makers, and really trying to be able to bring products and services to them if they need it. And so the farm is basically just an evolution of understanding what the needs are in the community and trying to meet the needs of the community with fresh protein and meats, eggs, things like that.
Very nice, very nice, very nice. And so you had the sales background and then you transitioned. Like, what was sort of the motivation for, I guess, stepping back from that more corporate background into something more entrepreneurial and so community driven?
Right. Well, in 2010, my wife and I attended a seminar, and it was a real estate investing seminar. And we were completely excited and ready to get into real estate investing, as so many other people are. And so we started our S Corp, the Red and Jarvis Group, and we started doing what we can do. We spent a lot of money trying to get trained. And just like most people, it didn't really get anywhere. You felt like almost you knew enough to be dangerous, but you didn't really have someone holding your hand through the deals until you actually got the check in your hand. But fortunately, I met a gentleman and he was willing to take me under his wing. And we did a partnership together for 2 years, and he taught me everything he knew. And I started actually doing real estate, flipping properties, buying lease options, leasing, a whole bunch of different, very creative financing techniques. And that actually led us to this property. We were living in a beautiful neighborhood, 5-bedroom, 3-bath house, sitting on a hill, 2-story brick house. It was just everything you kind of want, right? Everyone's mailbox looked the same, all the amenities, the pool and the hiking and the golf course was there and the basketball court and the clubhouse. But we just felt as though that we were kind of outgrowing that neighborhood. And so doing real estate, both my wife and myself, she was looking through MLS one morning and saw this property that just popped up. And it was interesting. So she didn't even tell me what she was doing. She literally just got up from the computer, grabbed her keys, and she said, "I'll be right back." I'm like, whatever, I'm working. So about 30 minutes later, she comes back and says, "Get your shoes on. I need to show you something." And I'm like, woman, I am busy. I'm trying to do these deals here. I'm trying to make these phone calls. And you're just telling me to leave and drop what I'm doing there, whatever. But I was obedient, got in the car, and we drove literally 3 miles away. And we pulled up on this property that was overgrown. You could almost smell the house before you even got out of the car. There's a junkyard over to the right. It was just hideous. And I'm like, what is this? And she said, "Look, here's the deal. This lady is an old white lady. She can't keep up with the house anymore. And she's selling it. And it comes with 4.3 acres with it." And so all of a sudden I went from just being a homeowner looking at property to looking at as an investor. And I just immediately clicked over and said, okay, no problem. So I started looking at the property, not as a house, but as an investment, like I would do anything else. And I saw the potential immediately. And so that day we did a full app on the property.
That day,
and
the day
we
you
got it
saw
under
it.
contract. Yeah, we don't mess around. We don't mess
Wow.
around. Boom, right there. And again, I think what happens is that when you're in real estate, doing investing, you're writing contracts, sometimes 3-4 contracts a day. You're writing contracts to get the property under contract, and there you have your due diligence opportunity to look over everything to make sure if you really want to do the deal or not. But if you're never under contract, you have no shot. So we did that. We went through a lot of rigmarole. The bank didn't even want to approve the property until we did repairs. So think about this. We had to do repairs on a house that we did not own, or we did not get the loan for the bank. Kind of crazy.
Wow. Yeah.
But we had these things like that. It came with a 70-year-old pool. And
why do you think that stipulation applied? I'm sorry to interject, but why like, is that unique? Is that common? Like, why was that your case?
It is a little bit unique. Now, I've worked with banks and done deals all the time, but generally if they know it's for investment purposes, you get what you get and they approve it because they know you're going to renovate it. This particular situation was a private residence deal. And so I don't know, but the bank just wanted to do that. And I'm not gonna sit there and have qualms with them. It's painting a little here, it's doing a little this there, but we knew that this property was going to be the linchpin by where our generational wealth was going to be derived from. Most people look at a home as a house. I look at a home as a bank account. I look at it as a bank account because with home equity loans and lines, you're able to draw off resources and equity from your property, be able to invest it in other deals, make more money with someone else's money. And so these are the type of the thought processes that my wife and myself have. So we got into the property, did a lot. We had to do inspection on the well, inspection on the septic, inspection on the pool, inspection on we spent probably almost $3,000 in inspections before we even got to the deal. But we knew how to negotiate, and we're able to basically shave off $30,000 off the price. And I knew that was going to happen because I've just been doing the deal. I knew this how it's going to work. When you have discovery on a property, and let's say you put a property under contract, and you go ahead and you do an inspection, and you pay, let's say, $1,000 for an inspection, and it comes back with this report of all the things wrong with it, and you give that to the copy of the seller. From then on, it has been disclosed of all the issues. So that means that if you don't buy the property, someone else walks up and says, I'm interested, by law, they have to give them that report. And we know that there were so many issues and things going on that she was we kind of knew. I've been doing this for a long time. I knew how to work it, and we were able to gentrify the property. And I said, yes. Me as a black man was able to gentrify a property from an old white lady, because it doesn't make a difference about race. It has to do with making something beautiful again. And so that's what we did. And so we did a $65,000, $70,000 first initial gut job, everything from the roof to the gutters, windows, floors, blew out walls, new kitchen, new bathrooms. And so over the last 6.5 years, we've been working on that and making sure that we're able to have a home that not only is for us, but also for our generation.
That is a beautiful thing to hear. And I'm putting emphasis on a couple things, and then I have to work my way backwards, because one thing I do know is when it comes to the whole, idea of gentrification, but from the standpoint of it's a black person in a white area, one of the things that I did notice unique about your situation is that as you approach the farm, you do see Confederate flags waving. And so how are the neighbors locally? Do you guys share chickens? Do you guys share sugar and eggs? Like, what's the relationship like with the neighbors?
As a matter of fact, we do share chicken and sugar and eggs. I have some really great neighbors, and I know a lot of times when you look at a property that has a Confederate flag anywhere on the property, there is a conception that you have in the terms of the quality, the ideology of the individual. And so we, as a family, decided not to make those assertions. We decided that we're not going to be scared away by no flag. I don't care how big it is, number one. If I want a property and I could purchase a property, ain't nobody going to intimidate me for me not to purchase it, number one. And then number two, there really wasn't intimidation at all. we do have a number of people up and down the street. Actually, my next door neighbor right across the street has a Confederate flag. Personally, and I know some people will kind of, the nose may wrinkle a little bit, but that flag does not have the same connotation to me that it does with a lot of other people who have had experienced pain, intimidation, and scare tactics from that flag. As I said before, I was born in New York. And the only thing I knew about the Confederate flag is that it was on the top of the Dukes of Hazzard car, and those guys were cool when they were jumping over rivers and stuff. That's all I knew. And literally, it wasn't until I was probably in high school where I started hearing people kind of like shriek when they would see that flag. And on the other hand, my wife is not from the North. She's from rural Virginia, Southern Virginia, in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's so far out, you got to go back in town and go deer hunting. That's how far it is out. It's way out there. And so, but even for her, I mean, she said she had people that had Confederate flags. It was never an issue for her. So it really does depend on a person's experience. But our neighbors have been very gracious to us. Very nice. They've helped us when we needed help. We have conversations. I have their number in my phone. If they need something, they call. If I need something, I call. We share different things with one another. When there's storms, we check up on one another. So I'm grateful to be in a situation such as that.
That is a great thing to hear. It was definitely because, being from this area and being from Durham, there are certain pockets that once you just keep driving, you start to see those flags, and you do, there's a feeling of, okay, maybe we need to go back before it gets too dark, so it's like, when I was riding out there, I was like, oh boy, this is just got a nice black family farm right here between these situations. So I was just curious to hear how that worked, but it's great to hear that it's actually not just functioning, but healthy, which is awesome.
Yeah. And the thing that's crazy is right next to them, there's someone who has a Black Lives Matter banner in the front of their house. So, literally it's a cacophony of all sorts of ideologies and thought processes. And I think, the bottom line is we always talk about Durham as being a melting pot, as being an opportunity for people of very diverse backgrounds. And sadly, over the last probably 5 to 7 years, the word of diversity has been really bastardized. Diversity used to mean you have a little bit of liberal, you have some conservative, you have some black, you have some white, you have some gay, you have some straight, you have a lot of different persuasions together. And sadly, diversity now just means how many black people you have, or how many gay people you have. And so I think that our street and our area is actually the most diverse because we have libertarians that are next door. I have liberals that are next door. I have conservatives that are next door. So all together, I think one thing that is the common goal is that we understand that we are responsible to some degree for the food and for our families. And, in our society today, we have relegated our food to conglomerates that are thousands of miles away, and they do not have any accountability to the quality of the food that we are putting in our mouths and we're giving to our children at the dinner table. And so I think one thing that we're understanding is that we have to be more self-reliant and create our own sustenance so that if things go bad, we can still not only take care of ourselves, but also our friends and our family, our neighbors.
Yes. That is very well said. And a couple of things I want to highlight from the transition, because just as someone, I really admire what you've done in terms of not just as entrepreneurs, but doing that as a couple and involving the family like that to me is admirable. And, what I heard and what I took away was at the beginning, there was somewhat of an apprenticeship of some sorts where you had to learn the trade from somebody, like somebody allowed you to learn from them. And so I just want to highlight the importance of like making sure that, we as people find those who can actually show us the way in some form or fashion if we have goals. And getting that apprenticeship, was that a person of color, or how did you get that initial apprenticeship opportunity?
It was really just favor. There's a gentleman who had been in the business for a long time, and I sat in front of him and I told him what I wanted to do. And he just kind of looked at me and paused. He says, normally I charge, $10,000 to train somebody and then half of all their deals for the first 10 deals. I'm like, wow. I said, I don't have that, but I want to learn. And he kind of looked at me sideways. He says, okay, I'll give you a deal. We'll do 50-50 for the first 10 deals. And it's funny that it took 2 years for me to do 10 real estate transactions. And at the end, when I gave him the last check, he said, Emmanuel, I need to tell you something. He says, I've been doing this for like 25 years. And they've had so many people come and say they want to work and when they want to do real estate and X, Y, and Z. And you're the first person to not only pay me and give me the half that you said you were to do, but you completed all 10 transactions. He says, there's no one I've ever dealt with that's actually been able to do that. And the fact, the dirty little secret is that when with real estate investing, only 2% of people who say they do real estate have actually even done one transaction. And so when someone talks to somebody, says, so what do you do? Like, I do real estate on the side. If you really want to burst the bubble, ask them, how many deals have you done? Because I guarantee you they haven't done any. And so even after I've done, I think, a total of 14 transactions, and I actually stopped about 3 years ago. Really haven't done much in terms of real estate since 2019 when we started our farm in earnest. And I just decided to divert my energy to the farm so we could really develop that and cultivate it. And I just knew that with all my other involvement in the community, that there's no way that I could do them both simultaneously. And so I said, you know what, I could always pick up real estate anytime I want to. It's not like I ever forget anything. But let's go ahead and develop this farm and to create some really good food for the community and also for ourselves.
Yeah. So the other takeaway was after the apprenticeship was the fact that it wasn't necessarily a plan, but the vision to take advantage of the opportunity, which I do think is important to highlight, because I think a lot of us oftentimes are hesitant to pull the trigger at critical moments in our lifetimes for whatever reason. Really impactful decisions, we're very hesitant to pull the trigger. And so how did you have that level of foresight to go from real estate to a family farm? Like that's a very I think unique, or not even unique. It's a vision that I don't think is common at all when it comes to our people and thinking about how to progress and create something like generational wealth. I don't really think that's what comes to mind. So I'd be curious to hear how you had the vision to take the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I've been an entrepreneur. It's in my blood. My dad has owned multiple restaurants. And so it's just kind of there. It's in my personality, it's who I am. In the past, when I was younger, all the way up until I think 2016 is when I left corporate America. Even when I was working for someone, I always knew that I would be working for myself one day. I always knew I'd have my own business. And actually, one of the things I did is because I knew that, I said, Emmanuel, you work for this employer like you want your employees to work for you. It's sowing and reaping. It's very simple. And so I tried, when I was working in corporate America, I tried to use my boss's money, his resources, his time to the best of my ability, because I knew that one day I'd have my own and I'd want employees to do the same thing for me. Now, how we got into and how we got to pull the trigger, there's a couple things. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, to some degree, even if I was by myself, there's some things I'd probably venture in trying to do. But
no worries. We're going to hop right back into that when he comes back.
I'm back now. Something happened.
There we go.
So my wife and I, we are a dynamic duo, and together we can do anything. And we're one of those people that we love spending time with one another. She's my best friend. She is the best human that I've ever met in my entire life. We work together, we play together, we cry together, we laugh together, we like road trips together. We just like being in each other's company. And that's not saying that everything's so kumbaya all the time, but we like being together. And so, today
that makes it a lot better to be married, right? When you actually like being with the partner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Makes it a lot better.
And so she's a wonderful woman, and it's really made it easy for us to live our lives and live out our dreams. And she'll be able to talk about some different things, and even the differences that we have. She honors me, and so she says, you know what, this is what I think, this is what you think, but ultimately she gives me the final say, and I try to respect her by thinking about.
No worries, y'all. We coming right back. I'm gonna be honest, man. They don't want y'all to see all this Black excellence through the airwaves. That's what they're trying to do to us. They don't really want us to spread this excellence throughout the airwaves. So they're trying to hold us back, but we not gonna let that happen. We still back at it.
There you go. Back again. I'm not going
Back
anywhere.
again.
So I just want to let you know I get kicked off 25 times. I'm come back on. Doesn't matter.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, I think it's really our marriage partnership. And then also just knowing that, we are believers. And so we have a relationship with God, and we really try not to just to talk about it and put scriptures on an Instagram, but have lewd behavior. Right? We're trying to live this thing out all the time in what we're doing. And we know that if God is before us, who could be against us? And he loves us so that even when we strike out to do something that's maybe a little risky, or maybe not even ill-advised, that we know that his love is so strong that he's going to guide us in the right direction. So my wife and I, we have this philosophy that it's our responsibility to pedal and it's God's responsibility to steer. So here's the thing, you know how bikes work. If you're steering, but there's no pedaling, are you going anywhere? You have to pedal, and then steering actually works. So our job is to pedal. And if God doesn't want us to go in a certain way, guess what? He'll turn the bike and we'll do a U-turn and go the other way, but we're going to continue to pedal. So I don't want to say we're fearless in terms of taking risk, but we're willing to do it. And I think that when people see our story and all the things that we've done, everything from the store that we built to the ice cream sales to farm to table dinners to classes on herbalism to chicken processing classes, actually teaching people how to dispatch a chicken humanely and cut it up, and all these things that we've done. A lot of people are like, how do you guys do that? I'm like, we just do it. If we come up with the idea, we think it through, I develop it, I market it, I put the graphics together, I put the program together, we put it out there in the ethos, and we see what happens. And it's impossible to catch fish if you do not put your rod and your reel out there. Bottom line, you will never catch a fish unless one dead shows up on the bank. But if you want to fish, you have to put your line in the water, and you have to put bait on your line. And so I encourage anyone, if there's a dream, if there is a promise, if there's a book, if there is a song, if there is whatever you want to do in life, do it. Stop waiting for someone else to come along to help you. Just start. Some of the amazing things happen is that when we start something, even in our infancy, in our ignorance, all of a sudden, as we're pedaling and we're starting, we start to attract people that can help us. We start to attract people that want to support us. But if you never step out, you'll never, ever see that support.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well said, man. And I mean, that is so well said. And when you and the wife purchased this farm, so typically as an entrepreneur, you have a vision, but then you get to pedaling, and then you start to see that maybe your initial vision wasn't what you thought it was going to be, and you shift. Yeah. What was the initial vision for the farm versus like kind of where it is today? Like, what was the initial thought process upon purchasing it, and what were the goals?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we started with chickens because chickens, we call that the gateway drug into farming. So we started with chickens for eggs. And initially, we started this because my daughter, she was 14 at the time, and we already told our kids this. It's like, so here's a shot. Mommy and daddy will pay for 50% of your car. Your responsibility is to come up with the other 50%. So if you come to me with $1,000, guess what? You get a $2,000 car. If you come to me with $7,000, guess what? You come in with a $14,000 car. So really the quality of the car has everything to do with you, not me. And we set that up really early. So at the tender age of 14 years old, my oldest daughter worked at a horse farm, made about $1,000 that summer, worked really, really hard. She was about to put her money in the bank, and then she saw what the yield was, and she looked at me and she says, 0.5%. I'm like, yeah. She says, I want that. I said, yeah, I wouldn't either. I said, so basically you get like, you get $10 back after a year, over $1,000. I'm not doing that. I said, yeah. I said, well, you could either do sweat equity, you could start a business, you can invest it. She says, what should I do? I said, well, Mama's always wanted to have chickens. Why don't you purchase a chicken, purchase a feeder, and all the everything you need to purchase for the animals, and then you can sell eggs and make your money that way. Give you 2 years and you do that. And so she did it. And by the grace of God, in 2 years, guess what? She was able to double her money, and she was able to have $2,000. And so she was able to purchase $4,000 car. So that was really the inception of the farm. And the second thing that was really in terms of familial, not just with my daughter, is that we said, hey, look, we want to be able to create enough meat on our property so that 75% of all the meat that we eat will come directly from our property. And that was a goal that we set. And I remember looking at that goal and I thought that was incredibly audacious. But guess what? We kept working at it, and before we knew it, 75% of all the meat that we ate came from our farm. And then we wanted to get into produce. And so we said, well, let's see if we can get 75% of everything that we eat comes from our own property. And so we were able to attain that with not really a lot of fanfare. And really the meat was initially like, hey, let's raise a pig, sell half of it, keep the other half, and basically we're able to eat for free. That was really our goal. And we did that basically in 2017, 2018, a little bit more in 2019, until 2020 happened with the pandemic. And it catapulted us into a new dimension in terms of sales, in terms of opportunity, in terms of broadening what we did. And it really moved us to the next level.
Okay, pandemic. So I got to pause there because I'm already like thinking about, you know, what how the zeitgeist was trending around that time when 2020 hit and everybody was forced to be outside and do different things at the time. So I'm already seeing how that could have a crazy impact. But for clarity, you had how many years at that property doing that before the pandemic?
Yeah, we moved in. I think in 2016, okay. And we done the renovations. We had our chickens that were, you know, laying eggs, and I think by that time we had also got some pigs, so we were messing with pork and enjoying that. And I think we went then into meat chicken, and we're raising meat chicken and processing and eating, having our own chicken available. I think by that time we maybe have even purchased some rabbits, right? So we're kind of just little by little just growing this thing out. So 2020 hit. Chicken. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. 2020 hit.
2020 was a very peculiar year because up until that point, I was an entrepreneur doing real estate, but my wife was a corporate nurse manager. She was a director of nursing at a skilled facility for the elderly and geriatric. So she's in this corporate role, and they just continue to pile on her. And at one point they said, well, you know, Miss Jarvis, if you can't handle it, maybe you need to find something else. And so she came home. She's like, you know what? I'm about to call their bluff. Check this out. So the next day she wrote up a resignation letter and sent it in. And they were like, wait a minute, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? She's like, I'm just going to go home and work on the farm. And they just looked at her like, how are you walking away from this type of job to go work on a farm? But that's exactly what she did. And that was check this out. It was like February of 2020, just before the bottom dropped out.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And because my wife worked in the geriatric industry in terms of nursing homes and COVID, they said, it's funny because when she dropped off her car and our computer, all that kind of stuff, they said, hey, do you mind just holding on to everything just in case if we need you for, you know, emergency or what have you? And she's like, okay, fine. But she literally flipped the script because instead of them telling her when she was going to work and how much she was going to work, now she's in a position where she tells them when she's going to work, how many hours she's going to work. And so God has just been really gracious to flip that script. And so during COVID, there were some times that they needed her. And she would look at the weather, honest to God. She'd look at the weather like, it's going to rain today. I can't do any work outside. I'll work for you. And so she became a specialist working with the geriatric population, working with doctors from UNC on different types of medication and protocols and sequestering and isolation and all this type of things. So she did that. But at the same time, when she wasn't working there part-time, we were on the farm, and my wife has this incredible knack of just knowing what's going to go down before it goes down and preparing. And I'll never forget the day she says, hey, Immanuel, there's a guy out west and he's selling chickens. And I'm like, okay. He says he has 90 of them. And I'm like, okay. And he said, yeah. And he's selling them for $10 each. And I'm thinking, okay, so we're going to get like maybe 20 of them. She's like, no, I think we should buy all 90. And I'm like, are you crazy? I mean, at that point, we probably had maybe 35 chickens. And so we're going to 3 times. Why? So I think we could sell them. And at first I'm like, woman, you're crazy. No way. And I just thought about it for a little bit. And all of a sudden I got a piece that, no, we should do this. And so we went across the state and bought 90 chickens and literally when we pulled into our own driveway, there were people waiting to purchase chickens for their
live
own
chickens.
farm. Live chicken, because people want to have their own flock. Do you remember 2020, this thing called eggs? Remember that? There you couldn't find toilet paper. Remember that? You couldn't find it?
So let me interject here before we go too far, because you said at the beginning there was chickens and you had eggs, but then you said you bought meat chickens or something like that, or so like, oh boy, I got a question about how much do you really need realistically just to get a few eggs going? Like, I know it might sound silly, but what really came first, the chicken or the egg? We gonna figure this shit. Let's see. We got them coming back. All right, so I gotta ask here, and I know it might sound silly, but you know, they always say what come first, the chicken or the egg. And so from if I'm at home and I just want to have a chicken with some eggs so I can have some fresh eggs for the house at a small scale at home, what would be the bare minimum I would need in terms of space? And like, do I need one chicken? Do I need two chickens? Like, do they have to do the thing? Like, you know, like what would I realistically need? And how many eggs would just that minimum setup produce over what time period?
These are good questions. And actually we have a backyard chicken class that we're going to be doing not this Friday, but next Friday. Is it next? Yeah, next Friday night. And my wife teaches everything about that, but I'll give you a little bit of insight. So first of all, there's two different types of chicken. There are egg layers and then there are meat chicken. Meat chicken is what you see in what most Americans have eaten all their entire life. And then egg layers are higher producing chickens. They don't really produce a lot of meat, but man, they can put out some eggs. There's chickens that can give you almost 300 eggs in a year. So out of 365 days, they're giving you 300 eggs a year. But most people don't realize is that eggs are seasonal. You wouldn't know it because every time you go to the grocery store, there are eggs. You can't tell the difference, but eggs are incredibly seasonal. Think about it. Why would a chicken bring forth offspring in the dead of winter when it's 17 degrees outside overnight low? They're not going to do it. And so a chicken is regulated by the day and the light. And the longer the day, obviously the warmer it is, but the longer the day, the more eggs they produce. And the shorter the days, the least they produce. So in your November, December, January, and February, egg supply is incredibly low. But we're now coming into March and April is the biggest month of all. All of a sudden, eggs will be coming out of our nose. They'll be all over the place. It's pretty crazy. So that's the difference. Got two different types of chicken, and they are seasonal. Now, I'll tell you this. The reason why people don't realize the eggs are seasonal, and when you go to the grocery store, you always see them, is because what major egg producers do is they have, first of all, their chickens in a chicken house. And how they trick the chicken is they never turn the lights off. So that means the chicken's equilibrium is not able to be set on sunrises and sunset. And so the chicken produces the same high amount of eggs year round. The problem is that after about a year and a half to 2 years, the chicken's dead because it's worked out. And so they just throw it away or turn it into dog food and get another chicken and keep it moving. We have more of a sustainable type of approach. So what we do is we focus on giving the chickens rest. And so in the winter months, they don't produce a lot. Guess what? We just don't eat a lot of eggs. Eat oatmeal. Have grits.
Right.
But we allow the chickens to rest so that we can have the chickens longer. And it's more of a natural environment for them to be in.
And how long is the lifespan of? So is it, do you need at least one male and one female for one to keep making eggs, or do they just make eggs? Like how? Yeah. Like
just like a female human, they make eggs and they make them every month, right? And chickens do the same thing too. You don't a human female does not need a man around for them to produce eggs. They're still going to have their cycle each month. And the same thing with the chicken as well. Although a chicken does not have a menstrual cycle, so you don't have to worry about that. But you don't have to have a rooster around. Now, when you do have a rooster around, there's a couple things that happen. Number one, the chicken feels more calm. They have safety. The rooster's always looking out for their benefit and looking out for hawks and other type of predatory animals. So the chicken just feels more comfortable and more relaxed. The hens do. And number one. Number two, then the chickens, the eggs are fertilized. Now, the next question most people have is, does it taste different? Does it look different? Absolutely not. Doesn't taste any different. doesn't look any different, and you don't really have to worry about fertilized eggs growing and you cracking one open. And you can imagine what that's like.
Like Jurassic Park.
Right, like, oh my God. Now, you don't have to worry about that because the egg has to be incubated for 21 days. And it has to have a specific temperature, 98 point, I think it's 9 degrees. And a hen has this perfect temperature. When they sit on an egg, that's when the activation and the incubation process happens. So if you have an egg and it hasn't been incubated, it's just sitting there, it's not formed. And even though it's fertilized, nothing's going to happen.
Wow. And if someone gets some eggs fresh out the farm, like what's the shelf life of a farm egg versus like the egg I might buy out of a grocery store? Like, what's the difference there?
Bro, I can't tell you about the grocery because I don't know how long them eggs been around. I just do not know.
That's a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah, I have no idea. It could be literally, it could be a month. Who knows? I just know that when we have eggs, they're so fresh that people have a hard time hard boiling eggs because when an egg is fresh, the membrane on side hasn't separated inside, and so when you boil it, when you try to peel it, doesn't peel well. So when people come to the farm and we ask them, so what do you do with these eggs? You go hard boil them? Says yes. It's like you need to wait at least 2 weeks for that membrane to kind of separate so they actually can peel them. So our eggs are incredibly fresh. We're pulling them every single day. But eggs normally have a shelf life of about 3 weeks, and they can be extended even longer than that if when a chicken lays the egg, you do not wash it. If you wash or wipe the egg, you're basically wiping away that protective membrane, and then you have to refrigerate the eggs. And the United States of America is the only country that refrigerates eggs. If you go anywhere else in the world,
this is a good point. This is a good point. This is a good point.
And they have all the eggs there, and they just pull them out and just do what they have to do. Only in this country. Don't ask me why. I don't want to get into the minutiae and the governmental regulations. All I know is that when you wash eggs, you take out the protective membrane. So we try not to wash eggs, but we always refrigerate them regardless because we know that that's the American standard. And if we just have eggs laying out, where people would freak out. So we refrigerate ours. We try not to clean them. But if they're really soiled and yucky, we do want to do that. Because, again, Americans don't like opening up a carton and seeing stuff.
Yeah. So how do you balance that as a farmer? Because that is one of the, I think, issues with the food industry is that it's so driven by the cosmetic of the food. And so there's a huge emphasis on not just producing food at a high volume, but then it gets rejected at a high volume because a lot of it doesn't look and feel a certain way. You mentioned you sort of balance some of that between you and with certain eggs, but I guess the question is, how are you able to maybe, balance that long term? Do you just kind of, is there anything you won't sell from how do you balance that as somebody who owns everything? And but yet you're still trying to, it's nothing wrong with it. It just might look a little funny. Do you just let people know that, or how do you deal with that?
No, we normally eat the ugly food.
Okay.
Right? So
ugly food feeds the family.
If the egg looks all funky looking, then we just eat it, right? We're not going to even mess with people. What we do a lot of education. So what we try to do is really try to educate our customers when they come to the farm on the processes, on how meat comes, where it comes from, how it's produced, how eggs work, the seasonality of eggs, all these things I'm talking to you about. These are things that we have to educate our customers because the average customer doesn't know. You go to the food line or you go to Harris Teeter or whatever, you get your little white eggs, you keep it moving. And then, when you come to sometimes the farm and our eggs are different colors, brown and light brown and dark brown, and every once in a while you might even have a green one, right? And so when you have these type of things, we have to educate our customers on why. Now, I have to tell you this. It's funny. A couple years ago when we started doing this, I said, why in the world, when you go to the grocery store, generally all they sell you is white eggs? I don't get it. Most chickens, guess what? Here's a dirty little secret. Most chickens don't lay white eggs. There's only about a couple breeds that lay white eggs. So why is that? And then they came and at first maybe it's just racist. It's not. It actually what it is that they put their eggs through a system to make sure that there's no fertilization or nothing funky going on inside. And when they shine the light through the egg, the lighter the shell makes it easier to be able to see through it. So it's called candling your egg. And so that's the reason why they do that, because white, you're able to, when you shine that light through it, when it goes through millions and millions and millions of eggs and they're sorting and making sure that they're all good for quality control, when you have that type of thing, and when you have what I'm trying to say, when you have them candled and you have a white color egg, it's easy for them to see that. So that's the reason why.
Wow, that's interesting. I think a lot of people too are conditioned into thinking like white eggs are inherently better than the brown ones too. Like I think that people get conditioned into thinking that just by going to the grocery store.
Yeah. Not only that, I remember growing up, people would say, oh, white eggs are for eating and brown eggs are for baking. And I remember hearing that. And now that, I've been doing this for a while, there's literally no difference. There's no taste difference, nothing at all with them. It's merely the color.
Okay. So, all right. So you started with the egg or with the chickens and the eggs, and then it goes from 30 to 90 plus. That was right before the pandemic hit. So how did the pandemic take things off for you all here locally? I know that was actually when I first got introduced to your farm. It was an outside event with a local, it was a black farmer. I think it was a black farmers market. They had a local event, farm to table dinner.
It was.
And that was the first time I got introduced to the whole theme, and you guys had a great story and everything was delicious. So how did the pandemic really help, help things take off for you guys?
Well, I think what happened is, with the grocery stores really being taxed, people were looking, and also they wanted to be outside. And so your farmers market exploded. People wanted to find local places where they could purchase food because the food supply chain had like a crack. It was a peculiar situation. And I think for the first time in a long time, Americans started looking at the food supply system and say, ooh, this is a little fragile. And it's very fragile. It takes one little cyber attack and Food Lion is not getting any food. Their trucks are not running. Even with a little ice storm, we completely knocked them out. And so people ran to farms, and we were here. And it's interesting that the 90 chickens that we purchased, we sold them and doubled our money within probably about 3 months, all 90 of them, because people were just coming to the farm. They wanted to start their own backyard flock so they could have a reliable, sustainable source of protein. And so that's what happened.
Wow. At what point, so I heard you say you had at what point did the vision go, you know what, we could actually go into full out livestock. We can do the chickens, the pigs, we can do beef. Where did it become full, we got everything?
I think it was in 2020 because not only we were selling the live chickens, but people were purchasing chickens that we processed. We were taking pigs to the butcher. So we had pork. We worked with companion farmers to be able to produce a really high quality beef. And so we're able to sell that. So we had beef, we had chicken, we had pork, we had all these different things. And I think really what set it off, that solidified in our hearts that we can make this into a full-time business that would support the family, is again, my wife again. I'll never forget, it was the beginning of June, and she came home, and I remember she came home through the front door, which we normally always come to the side. She came home through the front door, and she says, Immanuel, you're not going to believe this. And I'm like, what? She says, Durham Parks and Recreation have closed all of their camps, all of their activities, everything for the summer. And I'm like, that is crazy.
Right.
And she said, yeah. She says, you know what we should do? I'm like, what? She says, we should open up our own summer camp. And I'm like, what? That is the most brilliant thing I've ever heard.
Genius.
Because we have the animals, people collecting the eggs. We have the garden. We have the herbs. People so spending time with the animals, the little baby bunnies. We have the dogs. We had the puppies at that point. We had the chickens. We had meat chicken. We had the garden. We had a pool. Completely renovated the pool. So we had that. Some think we had, everything from scavenger hunts in the woods to kickball. We could just do everything. And we said, yeah. And so me, again, the one who does the marketing and the sales, I opened up my laptop and I created a website in about 3 days. And with a registration portal, advertised it, sent it out to all of our existing customer base through our newsletter, pushed it out on social media, and said, I don't know if parents are going to have their kids come to a summer camp because we're in the middle of COVID. It's all social distancing and all that kind of stuff. And my wife was just like, I'm an expert at COVID and making sure that people are safe. This is what I did. I'm like, yeah, you're actually right. You are. We put on there. She's RN BSN and specialized in that and making sure kids are safe. And we did all of our temperature checks in the morning. It was an entire outdoor camp. And if you think about it, our children were trapped almost like prisoners in their homes since March.
Right.
Schools closed in March, April, May, June. Here we go. And so for 3 months, the kids were home. They weren't playing with friends. They weren't socializing. They didn't have interactions, and they really needed it. And we just felt that the deterioration of the mental capacity of our children was really going to play a very detrimental effect. And so the camp was a way of just actually be able to bring socialization back to the forefront, but doing it in a safe way. And so we did it our first year. I can't remember how many kids we had. I think maybe like about 45 kids came the first year, and they absolutely loved it. And we had no issues with COVID, and parents were just grateful that they could send their kids somewhere. The kids got a nice little tan. They got to get in the water. They got to learn about animals. They got to taste vegetables. Right. They got the whole chicks and bunnies and all that stuff.
Right,
and it was great. Right. So 2023, believe it or not, we are entering our 4th year of Jireh Family Farm Summer Camp. And so we're really excited about that. Registration's already open. We got people registering for it. And now it has become a portion of what we do as a farm.
Very nice. Very nice. Now, you know, I could imagine the word is spreading. You are a quote unquote small business. Is there a cap on what you can take in the summer? I know, you know, if people see this, they want to make a move sooner than later, but is there a cap where you're going to have to start telling people, I'm sorry, but we're at capacity?
Yeah, so we normally do 15 kids per session, and we will do 6 sessions this summer. All 6 are slightly different. They're themed. So some of them are water week. One of them is field day. One of them is all about chickens. One week is all about goats. So we're focusing on different things. We even have one for a little older kids, I think up to 14, 15 years old. But yeah, we cap it at 15, and that's just to make sure that our ratios stay where we want them and kids get the attention that they need.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's great to hear. And so, you know, so it's nice also to see, like, it starts as a farm, but then you also, from a business perspective, find other ways to monetize the farm and the brand and what you can do in the community, and also provide a great service for the community at the same time. Like the idea of just being very community driven while also feeding into the community with a profit driven model, you know, like it can all work. Like that's a good version, I think, of what we call capitalism versus.
That's what I call it.
Yeah, and it's a shame, in my opinion, that, you know, I think, you know, you point out how America is unique in that with the eggs. And I think one of the other unique things about America is the fact that you can capitalize and build businesses and do things that you can't do as easily in other places as well. And so, you know, I think it's unfortunate that sometimes we as a community might shame the idea of capitalism versus like embrace it, learn it, and figure out how to help not just our families, but then the people around us. So
Absolutely.
I really admire how over time you and your family have figured out how to seemingly do that and be in position to build that over time.
Well, there's millions of people who are dying to come to this nation, but I don't see millions of people dying to leave.
Yeah.
So regardless of all the issues that we have, this is still a place for opportunity, and so we want to seize that. I speak of capitalism like I speak of a let's say a tire rod. Or a jack. No, what I'm trying to say is a jack, not a jack, but a crowbar. That's what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. So capitalism is like a crowbar. It is a tool that can be used for great good or great evil, depending on whose hands it's in. Now think about a crowbar. When I think about a crowbar, if I had one in my hand right now, you'd be like, whoa, what you about to do, man? Don't hurt me. Because Hollywood and our media has made the crowbar to basically be their weapon of choice for hurting somebody. But a crowbar's purpose is for really one purpose, and that is to be able to help you with the car when it's disabled with a tire.
Yeah.
But because we have popularized a crowbar into being a weapon, when you see a crowbar in someone's hands, the first thing you're saying is, hey man, don't hit me. Like there's no reason to say that, but that's what we do. That's what happens. And so capitalism has been the same thing. It has done incredible good. It has lifted out so many people out of poverty. 75, I think it's 70%. 70% of millionaires today are first generation millionaire. That means that they inherit their money from some sweet grandma somewhere. They made that money in their own lifetime. And there's not any other country on this planet that 70% of existing millionaires weren't millionaires, and their parents weren't millionaires before they were born. So we, our family, we just take what's given to us. We choose not to complain, even though we could. We choose not to focus in on the disparities, even though we could. They're out there. It's legitimate, but I'm just not going to focus on that. Here's another good analogy. I'll never forget this. When I was playing baseball and I was coaching baseball, they always said, hey, when you hit the ball, especially a grounder, don't look at the ball, just run as fast as you can to first base. Because they did statistics and they said that for every second that you look at the ball while you're running to first base, you're losing 7 to 10 feet every single time you glance at the ball where you hit it. So we always teach our kids is that when you hit the ball, run as fast as you can to first base, don't look, just get there. And in life, when we hit the ball in life, sometimes you get a bad pitch and we hit a grounder, or they rig the system and it's a grounder. You can stare at the ball and say, oh man, this is messed up, I'm gonna get out. Or you just put your head down and run as fast as you freaking can to first base. And that's a mantra that we have in our family. We're just trying to run as fast as we can, and we know that with God on our side, there's no discrimination, there's no racism, there's nothing that is going to hold us back from being successful.
I love that right there. I love that because, you know, I've had conversations, especially in this day and age, about being woke, etc., and equality and fighting for rights. And it's just like, I respect, you know, these legitimate concerns, but at the same time, I feel like we've been bamboozled into making this issue that we don't necessarily have to focus our attention on. We can focus our attention on things that actually build and benefit our families versus focus our attention on things that create, you know, I would say turmoil and misery within our thinking, and it creates a limitation even, I feel, on where we can go mentally, which is so critical to our futures in existence. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, the Black experience, I talk a lot in analogies if you haven't figured this out. And the Black experience, I equate almost to football. You have offensive coordinators that are focused on scoring touchdowns. And you also have defensive coordinators that are responsible for making sure that touchdowns are not scored against us, right? And the Black experience has a lot of defensive coordinators. You got a lot of people that are going after protecting our rights. When something is wrong, when there's an evil done to us, we have people that run to the camera, or run to the vigils and things like that, speaking up on protecting our rights and regarding us as valuable citizens that deserve respect and deserve honor, and they're fighting for us, right? And we need those defensive coordinators. But think about it. In the Black experience, how many offensive coordinators do we have?
Right. I love the way you're framing this. I love the way you're framing this, man.
Yeah.
I love the way you're framing this.
Hey, you can become a millionaire by the time you're 60 years old. Here are the things you need to do. We need to synergize. Look, I have a Black business over here that does pastries. I have another Black business over here that does jams. And I do this, and you do apples, and let's make apple pie together. And let's make sweet potato pie. We can form it, and let's scale it, and let's sell it to Walmart. And let's have a Black-owned sweet potato pie business in Walmart. And let's make some. These are things that we're not really focused on. We're more focused on the victimization and things that have been done to us historically and even today. USDA, all the things that have been done to us that have kept us back. And we need to focus on those things, but we must focus just as much as on a defense. We got to score touchdowns.
I love
that's
it.
What I'm doing.
Yo, man, shout out. I don't know if that's original. I don't know if you took that from somewhere and you flipped it.
That's me.
But okay, so we gonna give him the credit there because that's fire. I'm taking that one. We gonna repeat that one right here because I really love the way you frame that, man. We do have to focus on not just being defensive, but also being aggressive toward the goal. So I really appreciate that. So with that said, you know, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I really appreciate you having this open dialogue with me. The thing I want to sort of close on is the fact that, you know, you've had this arc you and your wife have had this arc as career people who have then eventually transitioned back to what a lot of people might frown upon, like the idea
Yeah.
of being farming and working for yourself and that sort of hard blue collar capacity. And so I'm just, we did highlight the importance of being, say, Black capitalists in a community driven way. But also, I think it's important to highlight the importance of getting back to what we have done as Black people from the start in which we came. And you and your family have embraced that in a very, I think, admirable way. I think it's worth speaking on the fact that, you're not necessarily doing something that's new per se. You're actually taking a step back and capitalizing on something that we've essentially failed to capitalize on for what is now a few centuries.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, here's the thing. The American slave trade really put a bad taste in African Americans' mouth in terms of agriculture or farming. Now, think about it. Prior to the American experiment in Africa, in Western Africa, Eastern Africa, this is what we did. Matter of fact, everyone did it. Everyone was farming because if you didn't farm, you didn't eat, right? But we were taken and we were brought here and we were forced to work on another man's property. And the produce that we worked and sweated and toiled to be able to produce was given to, the proceeds were given to the owners. And they were the ones that were benefiting from our work, right? Our toil, our sweat, our blood, our tears. But that doesn't mean that we should run away from it. It should mean is that we should run towards owning our own property, so that when I'm out there with my hands and my toil and my blood and my sweat and my tears, at the end, when I'm able to sell something and I'm able to get the profits from that, I keep that money. The land belongs to me. And not only belongs to me, but belongs to my children and my children's children. And what I'm able to cultivate on that property, I'm able to keep. So there's a part of what we're trying to do is really restoring the legacy of agriculture in the African American community. And we could talk about it in symposiums and conferences all we want. But the fact of the matter is that people, when they see it, when they experience it, and if we're able to do it in a way that's excellent, we feel that we'll be able to motivate more people to do the same. And so that's why we do what we do.
Wow. Yeah, that is great to hear because, to your point, it is, I think it's just critical. I think it's critical that we have examples like yourself to be highlighted as a case study. I'm real big on, I have a sales background, I have a business background. And so I think like business similar, like, so I really appreciate you talking about your household as a business, a bank account. And I look at, from a business perspective, you often learn through case studies. So you look at what successful businesses do, what successful people do. And I think us as a community, we need positive case studies and models on how we can go from A to B, C to D, and so I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to highlight some of what you went through to not just get to the point of having the vision, but also like once you had the vision, it didn't just stop there. You kept working at it, kept taking advantage of other opportunities along the way.
Yes, yeah.
I don't want to say a never ending, but it just seems like always a seeming desire to do something the next level. Like once we get to this point, great, but what's next? And so having that forward thinking mindset, having foresight and using that to plan ahead and attack the goals. Shout out to the Jireh family farm, man. That is greatly appreciated. Before we wrap up and get out of here, is there any last sort of words or takeaways that you might want to leave with the audience before we close out?
Well, I encourage everyone of this. Grow some type of food. It doesn't matter if your backyard is as big as a kitchen table. Grow something. If it's just one tomato plant, one cucumber, a little bit of basil, grow. I want you to think about this. The reason why we have poor in this nation is not because there's not a lack of food. It's behind a paywall for people to be able to access it. So if you have a little garden, if you've ever had a garden, you know this for sure. Anytime you've had a garden, You are always giving away to people. Hey, have some squash. Here, you have some zucchini. Have some tomato. What comes out? Gregarious giving emanates from people when they have their own garden, their own food. So if we truly want to help the poor, if we truly want to be able to help individuals to be able to have healthy food, everyone grows something. It's economics 101. Supply goes up, demand stays the same, price goes down. If everyone in Durham, think about this, if everyone in Durham grew tomatoes in the backyard, how much would tomatoes be at Food Line?
Right.
Nothing. And the people who couldn't, for whatever reason, grow tomatoes, they didn't have a lot of resources, when they go, they can get fresh tomatoes for next to nothing because the supply has gone up so much. The reason why eggs are $7 and $8 a dozen is because the supply went down, the demand went up, and egg prices went up. The supply went down with the avian flu. They wiped out millions upon millions of birds, completely just killed them out, turkeys too. And then in addition to that, the gas prices, everything runs on gas. The tanker freighter that's coming across the ocean runs on gas. The trains run on gas. Tractor trailers run on gas. The tractors run on gas. Everything's run on gas. So when you're taking corn and barley and all the things to feed chickens, and everything's running on gas, and gas goes up by 35, 40, 50%, along with the avian flu, what happens is you have a supply that shoots down. And when you have a supply that shoots down like that, your price is going to go up. I encourage people, grow things. And if you said, you know what, I've always wanted to have a farm, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Heard that line a lot.
Right.
If that is truly your heart's desire, be diligent with the small amount of property you have, and watch God bless you and multiply what you have.
Be diligent with what you have, I think, is so key. That's like, man, be diligent with what you have. If that's really what you want, you got to put like you said earlier, you got to pedal so that God can do the rest of the work. I really greatly appreciate you. If you haven't already, we got the link for the family farm in the description. Before we get out of here, Jireh, like, why that name? Why Jireh? Let's wrap it up here with that last question. I'm sorry to do that to you.
No, it's fine. People ask this all the time, because there's a lot of people who've never heard of that name, and some people have heard, like, what's the deal? So I was going to name the business something completely different. I came up with the graphic and everything, because I love doing graphics and stuff. And I came up with a completely different name. And in my devotions, I just felt like that wasn't it. That wasn't supposed to be the name. And so I really was given this name, Jireh Family Farm. And Jireh comes from an old Hebrew story, probably about 5,000 years ago, of a man by the name of Abraham, and he was promised that he would be a father. The problem is the dude was like in his 80s, and his wife was too. And he looked at himself, and he looked at his wife, he's like, I don't know how in the world we're going to be parents when we're this old. But God was faithful. And at the age of 98 years old, scripture says that he actually bore a child with his wife, who was also 98 years old as well. It was miraculous, obviously. Yeah. Well, 13 years later, the boy is, preteen, doing his thing. And God comes back to this guy, Abraham, and says, hey, Abraham. He's like, yeah, what's up? He says, you see your son over there that you love? He's like, yeah, man, God, thank you so much, man. I've been wanting a boy all my life, and I can pass on my assets to and have a legacy. He says, yeah, I need you to take him. I need for you to take him up to that mountain, and I need for you to sacrifice him to me. And Abraham was obviously beside himself, but the man was obedient. Somehow he just knew, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I just know that I'm supposed to do whatever God tells me. So he literally took his 13-year-old boy up on a mountain, tied him up, put him on an altar, had a flint knife, and was literally about to slay his own boy that he was promised for 98 years. And just before he was about to come down, an angel said, stop, don't touch the boy. Now I know you fear God, and I'm going to bless you more than you've ever been blessed. And so that boy's name was Isaac, and his child was Jacob, and the 12 tribes of Israel actually came from that lineage. And it actually says in scripture, it says, on this mountain I will provide. And the word in Hebrew that says provide, God will provide, is Jireh. So we named our farm Jireh Family Farm because we had zero resources to start this thing. It's not like, we got a big sale and it had, $150,000. Like, oh, let's start a farm. No, we started with nothing. I told you we started our chickens.
Started with debt. Started with investing before the loan.
Had $1,000, right? That's basically was the inception of our farm. And from there, little by little, by the grace of God, He's been able to just provide for us. And we're sometimes just really marvel at what we have and what we've been able to build in the 6.5 years that or actually 6 years that we actually started the farm. And we know that if we put our faith in Him and we're obedient and we do things with the right attitude and the right perspective, that we cannot fail. Impossible to fail. And it gives us a surety. It gives us confidence to take those steps. It takes us confidence to take big risks sometimes. We're like, where in the world is the money going to come from this? But we just have this confidence because Jireh, God provides, Jehovah Jireh. And so that's the reason why we have our name here, Jireh Family Farm.
There you go. Yo, y'all know what it is. Immanuel, thank you so much for joining. We're going to close it out right here. This is the G Shit Podcast. What a great episode. So insightful. I greatly appreciate Jireh Family Farms, Immanuel Jarvis coming on and share that story. Everybody, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do that. GSHPOD. Subscribe on YouTube, the only place you'll see these live episodes. We're out here now. This is the outro music. I appreciate the Jireh Family Farm again. Ha!